Hello. Now, if you've been following the series so far, you'll remember that I had been spending a couple of hours each day after homeschooling working through online courses. I'd signed up to a couple of programs that had been focused on personal growth and reconnecting with myself. I was totally lost at this time. I didn't know who I was anymore. My whole life had revolved around these two men who had taken advantage of all of my good characteristics and then made me feel like utter shit for any of the bad ones I have because I'm a human. But the more time I spent taking care of myself and listening to the stories of others who had been through difficult periods of their life, only to grow and come home to themselves and ultimately be 10 times happier than they had ever dreamed of, really gave me hope. I'm not a big fan of comparing stories. When it comes to experiencing human emotion, no one gets it worse or better. Yes, it's absolutely true that some may have experienced more physical trauma, more medical trauma, more emotional trauma, or more spiritual trauma than you. But just because someone doesn't have your exact experience doesn't mean they can't empathise with the emotions you've felt. And that also doesn't make your experience any less valid just because someone has had it worse. It's a sad fact that there will always be someone somewhere who's had it worse because when it comes to domestic abuse, many victims die at the hands of their perpetrators, and it can't get worse than that. But just because you didn't die doesn't mean you weren't deeply traumatised by your experience, and it doesn't mean that you can't take inspiration from others who have overcome their inner battles and now live life authentically and with purpose, who now know themselves and are full of energy, who know what they want and are confident in their ability to make it happen. And when we don't know how to do something, we can either learn how to do it from books or from other people's experiences, or we can go through the lessons ourselves. We can learn it or we can earn it. And to be quite frank, by this point I felt like I'd done enough earning of my trauma, and it was now time to use other people's experiences to model, to take their lessons from them, because I'm no more or less special than any other human being out there. So if they have the capacity to overcome this, then I do too. I've just got to figure out how. So it was whilst on one of these courses that I heard someone mention their coach. Now, beyond sports coaching, I don't think I'd ever heard of the term coach mentioned. I mean, I've heard of therapists and counsellors and energy healers when it comes to overcoming difficulties with experience and emotion, but never a coach. I was intrigued, so I had a little look around Facebook and I joined a group that was a place for coaches to practice with clients for free. I learnt pretty quickly that coaching isn't like therapy with a psychiatrist or a counsellor because whilst there's inevitably a lot of talking, it isn't really about going back over past experience. It's more about creating a vision for the future and then having someone there to support you as you take the steps to realise it. I suppose that sports coach is a good way to explain it. You see, a sports therapist would sit down and talk about all the things that you've done and gone through that have stopped you from achieving your fitness goals to this point. Whereas the coach works with you to identify these goals and then work out a strategy to get you there and then cheers you on as you start taking the steps towards them. And this kind of person sounded like exactly what I needed. I know therapy has its place, and I'd been through counselling at the end of my marriage, so I knew how helpful it could be for me. But right now, I wanted to be doing something, and I wanted to be focused on the future. It was pretty obvious to me by this time what Mr. C was, and just how much I'd been manipulated, controlled, and ultimately drained by him. But I had 2 children to support now, and I needed to move on with my life. I needed to reconnect with myself and find the good from all of this mess. I knew there had to be some, and I was doing everything I could to find it. I just had this burning desire inside me to prove that he hadn't broken me, far from it. And with each day that went past, I worked really hard on that trauma bond. I kept on researching and learning from other survivors. I read research articles and I watched hours and hours of YouTube videos. And then one day, someone put out an offer to deliver 3 values elicitation sessions for free in this Facebook group. I'd probably been a member for 2 weeks by this time, and really I was just intrigued as to what was really available. There were posts every day offering things like life coaching, mindset coaching, relationship coaching, and health and fitness coaching, and I'd skipped over them all. If I'm being totally honest, it was all too vague, and I didn't have long-term goals right now. I mean, I knew I wanted to have a prosperous future, but I didn't have goals. I'd practically had nothing. I was starting over from scratch. I didn't know what I wanted to do because I didn't know who I was anymore. But then this values elicitation post appeared and I was intrigued, and no one else had put their name forward, so I trusted that the universe had presented me with this opportunity for a reason, and I went for it. I was so scared, and when the lady who had posted contacted me to arrange the sessions, every fibre of my being wanted to back out. I had no idea what to expect. I'd never used Zoom before. I didn't even know if I would be able to speak to someone. I wasn't ready to tell my story. I hardly even knew what my story was then, everything was so foggy. But I could hear the words of all those other survivors and the people on that course in my head. Feel the fear, do it anyway. And so I went with it. And it was a truly transformational experience. Over 3 sessions, we used a recognised method to elicit my core values. Really look at what it is that makes me tick. Not what others see of me, not what I portray to fit in with others, what actually makes me feel good. And I loved it. It was such a turning point because by the end of the process, I had not only got to know me again, I'd been reminded what I love to do, how I get a sense of satisfaction, and I also had this list of values that could help me to make decisions in the future. Anytime I wasn't sure whether something was for me or whether I'd enjoy it, I can just think about my core values, and I know that if the opportunity or outcome aligns with my values, then I'll be satisfied, I'll be happy. And I'm so grateful to the lady who offered me those sessions for free. I had the first one a year ago today, and I wasn't in a position to pay for anything back then, but those 3 hours, they changed a lot for me. And since then, I've trained in conducting values elicitation with other people myself because of how much this experience changed my life, but more on that another day. I'm going to be sharing 5 of my core values in the comments, and maybe you'd like to share some of yours too. I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for listening. See you soon. Bye bye.